Hello folks, my name is KooPee Hiltunen and I'm the director of the Neogames Finland, which is the hub of the Finnish games industry. I'm also one of the founding fathers and board member of EGDF, European Games Developer Federation. I'm doing this recording on Friday 13th of November, so obviously when you see this, well, I'm in your past and you are in my future. I have been in the industry over 25 years, in digital media industry. And this is the first time I'm actually doing my lecture like this, recording it myself. And this is the first time I'm using OBS, so I hope everything turns to be fine. We are living strange times indeed. But before we go to the future or the roadmap to the future, which is the topic of this presentation, let's talk a little bit about the past. So I guess that everybody knows that, or it is common knowledge that the first digital game was made in MIT in the beginning of the 60s, so almost 60 years ago. But the digital games didn't emerge to the markets until 80s. And the technology back in those days, in the 80s, was first PCs like Commodores and Ataris and that kind of, or Amicas and that kind of PCs, and then of course consoles, alongside with the Nintendo and the first editions of Sony. So the market in the 80s was a retail market. So basically, it was a brick and mortar store. Different kind of applications, different kind of game cartridges and consoles and that kind of, and even C cassettes. Some of you might remember the era when we used C cassettes to download the games to the computer with Commodore, for instance. The digital culture was revolving around computer and console games. So they were the kind of light bearers of the digital games culture, computers and consoles. So basically games which were made by individual developers, hobbyist developers, or later on in the 80s commercial games, or more on the commercial side of the games. And the biggest influence to society was maybe that actually games were the thing which brought the computers to the home. Of course, at least in Finland, every parent thought that they will buy the computer for their kids so they can do something useful like word processing or something like that. But in reality, the reason why kids wanted to have computers in the 80s was that they wanted to play games. In the 90s, we saw the dawn of the internet. So before the internet, all the media and also the games were offline games. So they were basically downloaded from a disk or that kind of offline device. But the internet was a really kind of big changing also for the games industry. It was a big change for all of us in many ways, but it was also a big change in the games industry. And already in the 90s, we saw the dawn of the digital distribution. So the way most of the games are distributed, at least in Western markets today, and we saw the dawn of the monthly subscriptions as a business model. So these were quite substantial changes compared to the idea that you go to the retail store, brick and mortar store, and you get your game from there. And digital culture side, we saw the dawn of online communities inside games and other kind of digital communities. So all of a sudden, the internet made world smaller than it had been before. The games were a big driver of development of processor technology in 90s, and they actually created a demand for faster and faster computers, for faster and faster processors, because games were getting more and more complicated, involving more and more details and higher frame rate and everything like that. And it demanded much more processing power than before. And in the 90s, also the enabling policy side, youth politics, at least in some countries, started to support game development as a hobby. So in the 90s, the game development, at least in Finland, was merely a hobby. The oldest still existing Finnish game companies were established in 95. And it's the kind of era or the kind of year when the development of the Finnish game industry as we know it today started. In the shift of the 90s and 2000, we saw the first mobile phones. I guess that I got my first mobile phone. It was NMT phone. It was something like 94, 95 or something like that. But they really started to emerge to the markets in the latter part of 90s. And in 2000s, the mobile phones were already widely available in the market. So I have a son who is 26 years old, and I remember that he got his first phone when he went to the first grade in primary school. And it was basically mobile phones. They were for calling, sending text messages and that kind of stuff. But they were, in very limited sense, they were also useful for the game. And the very first games I remember, or the very first games existed widely in mobile phones was Snake in the 97, 98, which was embedded to the Nokia phones of that era. But if you have been playing Snake, you get the idea what kind of games were possible in those early mobile phones. In markets, the business models changed a little bit, and one of the biggest changes, or not the biggest changes, it was continuation from the retail stores. But the model which was dominant back in those days, I would say that in almost all the games, was paper download. So basically you paid while you downloaded the game, and it was that was it. There was no in-app purchases or anything like that. It was a game you downloaded and paid for the download. But anyway, in 2000s, the mobile games really emerged to the markets. So it was quite a slow progress in the beginning of 2000, but it actually really started to emerge or the games really started to emerge along the app stores. So Apple for first and Google second. So it was app stores as a phenomena created the mobile games culture as we know it today. App stores and smartphones. And games accelerated the adoption of mobile phones and especially the adoption of smartphones. I remember seeing my first smartphone, or Apple, actually it was the first Apple phone. I remember seeing it, my colleague was using it in 2007 or 2008, something like that, I don't actually remember the year. And I said to him that I will never adopt that kind of smartphone for my own use. And this gives you an idea how lousy I am making predictions, even if they come to myself. Enabling policies, we were discussing about network neutrality, so that was a big topic in 2000s. And I think that one of the things EGDF, first things EGDF was doing was state aid for game development. So trying to get more state aid for game development based basically to the cultural policies. So that was basically one of the main topics in the early days of EGDF. EGDF is established, by the way, in 2007. So And we had some discussions already before that, but those were the things we were doing back in those days. If you think about 2010, so last decade. So in technology side, smartphones, they took the market by storm. I don't know how many so-called dumb phones there is anymore. I know that some elder people use those phones, but even I'm using smartphones, obviously. And tablets, which were kind of new class of devices. And if you think about some of the turning points in the Finnish games industry, one of them is definitely Supercell. And Supercell's strategy was in when they started to develop games after the initial Facebook game Gunshine, which didn't go too well, was that they wanted to go to the tablets first. So make games that are playable in mobile phones, but which are basically better fitted to the tablets. So big data, how do we get as much data as possible from the players? And how we can combine and use that data to make better games. Machine learning, community-driven production or product development. So creating the communities and listen to the communities to aid in the game development. And it was also in 2010s there, it was also the dawn of the data analytics. And nowadays, when we talk about the game development, we talk quite a lot about data analytics, but it emerged in 2010. And if we think about the biggest changes in business models, free to download, free to play, in-app purchase model, it was a big change. It was a very, very big change. It took the whole the value chain upside down. And for instance, the growth of the Finnish games industry wouldn't have been possible without that change. And in that sense, it created a game market or the game industry again. So this change connected to the in conjunction with the free-to-play model or the change in mobile distribution platforms they are one of the biggest drivers alongside with data analytics and user acquisition, or they are one of the biggest drivers why we are here where we are at the moment. Digital culture side, so games for smartphones, obviously. Uh, I think that I saw my first location-based augmented reality games already in 2010, 2011. But it was too early days for those devices were clumsy, technology wasn't there, and people didn't know, the players didn't know, and maybe the game developers didn't know how to use those technologies or assets properly. I have a feeling that we still don't know how to use AR in the games properly. Esports, it was obviously even before that in Asia, in Eastern world, but it became a phenomenon also in the Western world in 2010. And for instance, in Finland, the YLA, which is the national broadcaster of Finland, started esports broadcasts in 2014. So it gives you an idea that if somebody enters into the TV, into the mainstream, it should be quite big. Influence on society, so data analytics mentioned a couple of times, and community. So the digital community started to emerge alongside with the rise of internet. But in the game side, they became really important in 2010s. So community management actually it became a tool for once again developing better games for getting feedback and developing better games for the players. And things we were discussing also in the EGDF, in policy side in 2010s were data protection. So everybody remembers and loves GDPR, which was quite a big change in many ways. Not so much in the way how we deal with the players, but how the technologies make the GDPR requirements possible for the game studios. And there was a lot of discussion about digital consumer rights, which is ongoing discussion at the moment, as we well know. Now we are in 2020, so we are in this decade we are actually living at the moment. What about the technology? Wearable technology. It emerged like some years ago in the form of for instance, smartwatches like this Samsung Galaxy. But I guess that wearable technology, or I predict that the wearable technology will be more commonplace in the future. So there is many possibilities how it can show itself, haptic suits and controllers, different kind of intelligent clothes or something like that, which also can be used for gaming. AR and VR, it was a big phenomenon some 4 or 5 years ago. There was even a hype of AR and VR, basically mostly in the VR. And it was expected that the VR games are going to take the market by storm, but it didn't happen. The reason for that was mainly that the devices were too expensive, they were too clumsy, there was wires all around and they weren't comfy to wear. Now it seems that the devices have become cheaper and they are wireless at the moment. They are much lighter than they used to be. The quality of them is way better than it used to be. And I think that it might be possible during coming years that they are going to be one of the gaming platforms of the future. Playful Internet of Things. Games are more in depth in our culture than we even understand. So Playful Internet of Things means that maybe in the future games are going to be implemented to many things and many devices we use. One of the things I'm a little bit worried about is that also the artificial intelligence and algorithms are getting more and more refined. And we have already seen that the artificial intelligence can create music, it can create writing, it can create books, it can create even very simple movies. And there is no doubt in my mind that that in coming years also games will be created by algorithms and artificial intelligence and voice-based interfaces. So I think that we have been practicing quite a lot with the voice-based interfaces, but I don't find them very functional yet. But this technology is going to develop in the future. In the market side, the big phenomena, or it's not even a phenomena, it's a reality in the market, is that most of the mobile games at least are services. So they are not products only as they used to be some years ago, they are services. Companies launch games and they develop them based on data from the markets, based from the opinions of communities and so on and so on. And if you have a successful game, at least on mobile side, there is no reason to launch a new one. So if you have a successful game, stick on it, and that's the way how companies are doing it at the moment. If you think about Finland, for instance, 4 years ago, when the industry was actually smaller than it is now, a little bit smaller, we had around 150, 200 new games launched every year. During last couple of years, we have had something around 100 games. And the reason for that is mainly that games are services and there is not so many true game launches anymore. Augmented reality games, we have seen some. Uh, 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 I think that we can discuss if the Pokemon Go was an augmented reality game or not. I think that it was in a sense. Uh, but we are going to see more of those. As I said before, or did I, that I have a feeling that game developers still don't know how to use augmented reality properly is actually the biggest obstacle for developing of augmented reality games. It seems to be that in many games the augmented reality part is only an add-on, so it doesn't have any value for the players, or it doesn't have enough value for the experience of playing. Personally tailored game content, that's definitely what we are going to see in the future. So basically, so that there is a multiple people playing the same game, so to speak, but the experience is a little bit different uh, based on the likes of the player. And one of the things we have been talking already quite a long time, I think that the first discussion started in the end of the 90s, is that games and AV culture in general are going to converge. Um, we have seen something like this already. So basically 360 degrees cinemas with interactive possibilities. But it might come also from the technology side, the development I mean. So how about using game engines like Unreal for actually making a movie? It has been done in many cases already. And I think that it's going to be more common way of making, for instance, feature films in the future. So influence on society. Global gamer communities, they are already big. They are getting increasingly multinational. They are growing increasingly big or they are going bigger all the time. And as before, the games are going to be a driver also in technology, and technology is going to influence to the society. So games maybe are bringing the virtual reality to the technology commonly available, and in a way it can be a kind of gate for making augmented and virtual reality part of the everyday life in a way that we can't comprehend yet. There has been a lot of discussion during COVID-19 about the new work, and I think that one of the things which the COVID-19 has proven, at least to some extent, is that game industry is ready for new ways of working. Is it remote work, or is it some kind of distributed model of producing games or something like that? We are ready for it. Uh, the COVID-19 actually has showed us that games industry is a resilient industry when it comes to the way how we can adapt to the changes and produce things even under these very unusual circumstances. And in that sense, the lessons learned and the technologies adapted in the games industry uh, uh, can be useful for other industries um, also. One of the trends we have seen for years is that being a amateur developer, hobbyist developer, is easier year by year. This is basically due to the tools. So tools are getting easier to use, and all the time more and more people can make games which are actually good ones. But the hiccup is that when these tools make game development possible for everyone, the competition in the markets, and I mean in the mainstream markets and that kind of places is getting tougher. So it's already quite tough to be a small game developer. but I'm afraid it's not getting any easier in the future. Although there is going to be new distribution channels, although there is going to be changes in business models, although there is going to be subscriptions and that kind of things, but there is going to be a lot of there is going to be a lot of demand, but there is going to be a lot of companies and individuals providing games to the market. When it comes to the enabling policies which should take place and which we have been talking inside the EGDF and with the EU and with the politicians, solving the talent shortage is at least in Finland at the moment a key. We would be able to grow more, but we don't have talented people enough. And this is a complicated dilemma. It seems to be that it's pretty much the same story in all game developer countries. We have to find new ways to educate people to the game industry, work in the games industry, but we also have to make people moving from country to country even easier as it is today. Nowadays it's easy inside the EU, but if you are willing to hunt some employees outside the EU area, it's getting pretty complicated in many of the European countries. Prevention of digital exclusion basically means that there is a number of people who are not in the digital world yet. And if this continues, it kind of creates two classes of people. Those who have access to the digital content and ability to use digital content, who are savvy enough, and those who are not. And this is something which we don't want to see happen, because when you create these kind of divisions, or when these divisions are created, it's not a good thing when we think about the stability of the society, for instance. One thing we are talking at the moment quite a lot is platform regulation. So biggest platforms are from USA or from Asia. We in the Europe are in the middle of those two bowls, or those two continents, or two poles of the power, and we had to find a way to make the play field more even also for the game developers. I already mentioned about the artificial intelligence, so how it is going to change things future. Because it's going to change things, we need to have a transparency so that we can see, for instance, more and more inside the algorithms, how they work, what are their functionalities, and what kind of things they are actually executing. And one of the big topics has been for years climate change. And there is a lot of things we can do for the climate change. Of course, cutting the emissions using green zero technology and that kind of stuff. But for instance, in Finland, we have this thing called Playable project, which was basically that we pooled around €500,000 money together, and as an industry acquired or bought 330 acres, something 130 hectares of forest, and preserved it. And that's something we are going to do also in the future. So going to buy new pieces of forest almost every year from that point on, from this point on. Okay, and now I had to give you a liability warning. When it comes to the games industry, everything which is beyond 10 years, it's more or less science fiction. Typically, we can see like 1 or 3 years, in good case 3 years, we can see the future. But when it goes over 3 years, and when it starts something about predicting what is going to happen in 2030 or 2040, it's more like a science fiction. So take my words with a grain of salt in that sense. But the technology side, brain-computer interfaces, Well, they are science fiction. Matrix. Are we part of Matrix already? Or are we going to be part of the Matrix? Your guess is as good as mine. Augmented reality lenses, it sounds like more like something which could happen. So contact lenses with all the augmented reality capabilities we are seeing in these lenses which are made by like these. So virtual assistants. I think that virtual assistant is actually something which is, might be very useful in a game. And I think that I know there is a lot of companies developing that kind of functionalities at the moment. And I guess that in the future, uh, in a first-person shooter, in the heat of the battle, you can actually give some tasks to the virtual assistant to do something which is too complicated to do through the keypad. For instance, that's kind of one thing where I can see it handy. When it comes to the market, digital content and games, because games are the mainstream of the digital content at the moment, they are going to be driver of the market, different kind of market shifts. And I don't know what kind of market shifts they are going to be, but there is going to be market shifts also in the future, because there has been a market shifts in the past. And these kind of structures, they are pretty permanent in the games industry. And business models. So I think that we have only seen the tip of the iceberg of different combination of business models or business models in general. So there is going to be a lot of new business models, and there is going to be a lot of new combinations of business models. Extended reality on the digital culture side. Maybe that is when we see the audiovisual industries and game industry convergence. Digital games will become an inseparable part of physical reality. Well, I don't know. It might be. It might be. It doesn't sound too appealing to me, but on the other hand, I'm quite old. And if you think about digital culture, I don't know how big part of humankind is at the moment in the internet. But in 10 years, in 20 years, I guess that we are all going to be in internet, considering that there is internet or something similar. Influence on society. Games are one of the key applications of brain user interfaces. Same old story. Games are the driver of technology. Guessing that they are always going to be. And enabling policies is, well, basically protection of the mind. Now we are talking about consumer rights and that kind of things, protection of privacy. But of course, if we have this kind of brain-computer interfaces, we have to start talking about the protection of the mind. And bridging the digital divide, I think that I already referred it to the previous slide. So that is going to be one of the policies from 2030s, 2040s. But as I said, making predictions is always hard, and I don't have a very good history of making predictions. So take my words with a grain of salt and think about yourself what you would like to see in the future. Because one of the truths is, and this is solemn truth, that there is no future as such. The future is not something which is laying ahead of us, being like a futuristic future. Future is something we also create. Future is something we can actually affect with our actions. So if you want to have some kind of future, it's partly up to you to make it happen. And that's the way how this story works. So thank you everybody. It was nice to make this presentation. Thank you, Maros, for asking me to do this. And I hope that everything is well in your end when you see this video. Stay safe. Thank you.